That wasn't profoundly affected by what happened on April 16th. Nothing we can say, nothing we can do here today is going to make any of these families feel any better. Sadly, there's nothing that that can be said to that. It didn't, on a personal level. I have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old son, and I had to sit down with them that night and try to explain to them why somebody would do something so evil. And as everybody sitting here today knows, there aren't words that can describe why somebody would do something so evil. And to try to look into eyes of a scared 10 and 7-year-old and somehow give them comfort, I couldn't do it. And I still can't do it today. So with that said, I just wanted to offer my thoughts and prayers to the families that have been directly touched by this and affected forever. And as I said on Friday, and as I'll say here again to you today, there are some things I'd like to point out that are not easy to say, certainly in talking about in this atmosphere, but that's what this body is here for, the body of the people, to make decisions and weigh things on evidence and work in the will of the people. Simply put, there is no loophole at gun shows. Everything that takes place at a gun show can take place anywhere else in the Commonwealth with regard to transaction of a firearm. There are no special rules for gun shows. So therefore, there is no gun show loophole. You are either a licensed dealer, licensed by the federal government to conduct transactions on firearms, or you're not. There is no such thing as an unlicensed dealer. So those are, and it's not something that the media talks about gun show loopholes, and they talk about unlicensed dealers. You're either a dealer or you're not a dealer, subject to all state and federal laws. Every state and federal law applies at a gun show as it would at a gun shop or as it would in my living room. And we've heard from a host of highly respected and highly placed law enforcement officials today, even Colonel Flaherty from the state police, who said that, police officers like to horse trade guns. I don't necessarily like the wording there, but what he's basically saying is that they're above what takes place at a gun show, simply because they like to do things among friends. Well, since the rules are exactly the same at a gun show as they are at a gun shop, as they would be in any one of your living rooms,
no.
By extension, you've got to say, if you support 109, you also support that a background check must be conducted on every transaction of every firearm, regardless of where it takes place, since the laws are the same. Please, Mr. Chairman. And essentially, that's where I'd like to leave that, Mr. Chairman. The law is clear. Federal law is clear. State law is clear. From a National Rifle Association perspective, we worked with leaders at the federal level, United States Congress, both sides of the aisle, to address what we perceived and believed to have been a gap in mental health reporting and those who should be prohibited from purchasing or owning firearms. We did that just prior to the close of session in 2007. Something that we look forward to and hopefully can work together with in this body to effect similar legislation. But we will certainly oppose Senate Bill 109 for the reasons I stated out today, and I hope that the body will see it the same way and reject this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a couple questions? We're talking about the same set of rules apply in every situation. Of course, an unregulated sale is not going to take place in a gun shop, is it?
Senator Deeds, an unregulated sale, Mr. Chairman, could take place in a gun shop so long as the person doing the transaction was not a licensed dealer. A federally licensed dealer, no matter where they are, as I said, even a federally licensed dealer
in their home
has to do a background check.
Right.
Exactly.
So, but how often does an unregulated sale take place in a gun shop?
I don't know, Senator Deeds. You could agree on a sale in a gun shop and perhaps do it somewhere else.
How long does a background check take?
2 to 5 minutes typically, Senator Dees, not much longer than that.
And you heard Colonel Flaherty earlier say that 22 to 35% of sales at gun shows are from unlicensed sellers.
And Senator Dees, I have a difficult time figuring out where Colonel Flaherty got that information, considering that private sales at gun shows are not recorded. So I'm not sure how he would then know that 22 to 30, I'm not saying that those numbers aren't right, but I don't know that there's any way you can document that that's true or not true.
Okay, do you have any information on the number of vendors at gun shows? What percentage of those are unlicensed sellers?
Senator Dees, I know that Tom Evans probably can give you a better idea in terms of from a dealer and promoter perspective. On average in the Commonwealth, I would rather wait for him to give you that information than come from me, if you don't mind.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Committee. My name is Philip Van Cleve, President of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. I've got a little handout going here. First of all, again, Virginia Tech had nothing to do with the gun shows. And Cho actually waited the 30 days that Virginia law requires when we get a second gun. It was the second gun he used. And even then, he did not go to a private seller. He just simply waited, bided his time, and kept his plans going. The gun show sales the private sales at a gun show are not a significant part of the guns that are used in crime. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, it's 0.7% of the criminals that use guns in a crime got them from a gun show. So no matter what happens here, you're not going to make any noticeable impact on any of that. Criminals get their guns on the black market. They usually steal them. So that part's not going to matter. And I'm not going to cover any, I'm skipping over my notes here because I don't want to waste time covering things that have already been covered. But when you look at the whole concept of what would have to happen at a gun show to do what you're suggesting here, I don't think a lot of people are really understanding the significance of it and the amount of how onerous this would be. First of all, we talked about the instant check. I bought a gun at the last gun show in Richmond a couple of weeks ago. I had to wait overnight to get it. So, I mean, instant check, I'm just saying, when they say 2 to 5 minutes, that's the second time it's taken over a day. All right. So I just want to make sure it's clear that that's not an instant check. Number two, you're going to have to find a dealer that even wants to do this.
Is there a question for Mayor?
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Rankley, you made a remark on how onerous this is on you. Let me ask you just a question. How onerous do you think this whole thing's been on that family sitting right there to your left?
Well, yeah, well, it's not so much me as it's going to be the gun show. You know, I waited overnight, that's fine. But I just wanted to point out that it's just not exactly the way that people are saying that it is, not in my experience. Anyhow, you've got to find a gun dealer that's willing to do this check. And I've talked to quite a few gun dealers about this, and none of them are interested in this. They're number one, they have to take the gun onto their books before they can do this transfer. It becomes part of their inventory, basically, at that point. They have to hold the paperwork for 20 years. And there are quite a few felonies in this bill. So if you make a paperwork mistake as the show promoter, as the dealer, or if you're a person that doesn't understand the procedures for going through this, you can become a felon. I mean, this has really got some dangerous penalties in it.
Mr. Chairman, that is not correct. To be a felon, you would have to willfully and intentionally violate the statute.
Yes, Mr. President, I have been putting these bills in for 4 or 5 years. No gun dealer has ever appeared and objected to the requirements of this bill. Continue, Mr. President.
Thank you. So basically for a fee of like $15, they have to carry the paperwork for 20 years. They have to give up their sales at the gun show during that time to sit there and fool with this little tiny sale that they're going to get $15 for, without all the headaches that go with it, as opposed to when all the customers that are waiting, and often you can't hardly get to the dealers' tables at these shows because there's so many people. As a business, it makes no sense to make people willing to spend $500 to $1,000 for a little $15 sale. I can tell you the dealers aren't going to be interested. And you've put the onus on the gun show promoter to come up with a dealer who wants to do this. I'll be curious what happens if all the dealers say no. Is the gun show then unable to go forward? It's a real problem that it isn't going to make any difference when it comes to crime. In fact, it's unfortunate, and like the other speaker said, if anybody as a group felt the pain of what happened at Virginia Tech, ours did very much so, because for the 2 years we've been fighting to let students and teachers and faculty defend themselves. And when that happened, it was a very big nightmare. But then we have a solution that would let people protect themselves. In the end, it doesn't matter how the criminal got his gun. It doesn't matter if he stole it. It doesn't matter if he got it in a private sale, or like Cho, if he actually passed the background check and got the gun. It doesn't matter. All that matters is when all of a sudden everybody's life is at risk, that somebody can stop him. You can't stop the criminals from getting guns. If you think you can, then how come we have a drug problem in America? It's illegal to have crack cocaine anywhere.
Just a minute, Mr. Franklin.
I'm sorry.
Only one person can speak at a time. Please respect the speaker. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. The crack cocaine is illegal everywhere in the entire country. You cannot legally own it. Nobody can even have it. But it's on all the street corners. You can't stop criminals from getting guns. Guns are not rocket science. It's a very basic thing. You can make a gun in your garage. So in the end, you want a solution that will stop the criminal. That's what I think you should be looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senators, Committee. My name is Wayne Phillips. I'm a retired naval officer, 25 years of service in the Navy, but I stand here now as a citizen to address this very topic. Who's your last name, sir?
Kulick, K-U-L-I-C-K. I've heard a lot of arguments from the proponents on this, but basically they've been emotional arguments. I haven't heard any data. The data that I have heard is the only authoritative source, which was the study done of 0.7% of sales at a gun show went to felons. Now, the other side of the coin was the law enforcement chief that was up here said, well, it's 20 to 30%, but there's no data that's been presented on that. That's just a wag, and it's in direct contrast to the official study that was done at 0.7. Now, 0.7%, and I like numbers, that 0.7% was done as total sales at a gun show. So that didn't even address the number of private sellers that chose their venue to be a gun show, vice their home, and sales, which is going to be an infinitesimally smaller number than that 0.7%. So all this bill really does is going to limit the choice of venue for a private seller. Myself, if I choose to sell a gun in my home, or if I choose to sell it where I have a broader population to advertise my gun, it just changes the venue. It doesn't change the fact that the sale is going to occur. The seller is going to sell. Now, I heard one gentleman, police chief up here, that said, well, I've had people who come to me that say, I would love to have that ability to run a background check. Well, make it available to them. Don't mandate it. Allow them to have that check if that so be they would like that check. What's to prevent that? So I would just hope that this committee, when they retire to Wednesday and they look at the bill, that they look at it on the data that's presented. Don't take an emotional argument from something that's happened in the past where that particular scenario did not involve conditions of this bill, and evaluate this bill based on the data that's presented before you and that has a predictable outcome that you can measure. None of those that I can see.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, even if we were to accept the 0.7% number going forward, that would mean there would be deaths, does it not?
Ma'am, in all due respect,
You don't know that, because that .7 wasn't broken out to private sales. This only affects the private seller. So even if, I mean, I could also make the argument that if you do pass this bill, can you guarantee that any sale at a gun show will not show up, turn up in the hands of the felon?
Mr. Chair.
Can you make that guarantee? And the answer would be no.
Yes.
Just a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
I want to play the devil's advocate with you for a minute, Mr. Cool. You make a sale, you're not a licensed dealer, you make a sale in your home, chances are you're going to know the person you've invited into your home to make this, and your buddy comes in and says, I want to look at that 30-30 you got, and I've got a little extra money. You're going to know that person.
Depends on how you advertise it, but yes, most likely that's probably.
And that's probably not going to happen at the gun show. Isn't that a distinction?
May or may not. I wouldn't be able to state specifics on that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Tom Evans.
Good morning,
I
Mr. Evans.
represent the Virginia Shooting Sports Association and C&E gun shows, and I am a partner, promoter in a gun show in the city of Norfolk. Much that has been said has some good responses that we now no longer have time for. One in particular is the percentage estimated by the state police. They have the records of the guns that were sold with record checks, or pretty close, because in some types of firearm, two may be bought on one record check, or two or more. It's only handguns that take one record check per firearm. And then not always, because the law permits a concealed carry permit holder to buy multiples in one record check, based on his already sparkling clean record. Now, what is being noticed is that people come in to the entrance, pay their way into gun shows constantly, all during the show. They bring all manner of firearms that are legal to possess into the gun show. That probably still does not reach the percentage estimated, because these are less than 0.1% or 0.5% of the firearms that are available for sale. Now, when you get to actual sales, record checks will tell you that something in the neighborhood of 500 guns go out of some gun shows. I believe that many has gone out of the show that I participate in a 2-day show. However, the guns that walk in the possession of ticket buyers mostly go back out, or another one that they traded for with a dealer goes back out. These people don't nearly all sell their firearm, although some do. You see people with an old World War II rifle with a flag sticking out of the barrel, a little paper flag, quoting a price for that firearm. You see people in all manner of possession of firearms walking that floor, looking for a trade with a dealer, but not refusing one for a walk-up person who's interested in that firearm, usually some kind of a collector. You don't find the guns that are said to be attractive to criminals walking around that floor in any significant numbers. Some do. There are some revolvers, there are some semi-automatics that come in. Mostly they get traded with a dealer for the newer model. The same happens at stores, and by the way, at the stores, private sales do occur. Even the owner of the largest gun shop, the most well-licensed guy in Virginia, has a differentiation made in federal law between his sales of business inventory and his personal collections. He can stand in his store and sell a firearm from his personal collection without a record check. That's seldom done, but it can happen. Two customers can come in a gun shop. One having the gun on him that he already owned, buys another and turns to the other fella and sells it to him in a private sale right there in the middle of the floor. There's nothing to bar that. There's nothing wrong with that. Look at the little green sales newspaper, nothing but ads, that you find at 7-Eleven and other places, and you'll usually find several gun listings. And those people end up in private homes buying from that advertisement. Lots of them do. This is something that spreads all through the fabric of Virginia. It is not especially higher at gun shows than anywhere else. You just see more come in and more go out. Match the outgo with the number of record checks and you'll have a pretty good match, I would expect. Now, I want to answer your questions, those that you've had, but I want to say one other thing. Technically, this bill is very damaging. It's damaging to show promoters, particularly, inasmuch as the term that has always been used in every show, whether it's antiques, computers, boats, guns, or whatever, a vendor is the person who buys, or rents rather, the table and stands there and does his business throughout the show. It will be an immense problem to curb the use of the word vendor and make it understandable to the people that would be affected by this bill if it passes. Please select some other term. The people who come in the door are maybe there for half a day, some a whole day, very seldom for both days. The vendors are there from before opening until after closing both days. There's a big difference in that. And it sounds innocuous here, but it is a great inconvenience to everybody who has to deal with that in the show floor. Now, question?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Dean.
that 500 gun figure you said that went out of the gun show, are those guns from unlicensed transactions, or that's a total number?
That's something close, and I don't have a record. I believe my memory is close, but I believe that is, in my case, that has been the record check sales.
Okay.
The number comes from the state police. You can find out.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Senator
you don't have any way of knowing about unrecord checked guns. They go
I
out here
have
and-
surveyed incoming firearms. Many of them went out exits that I couldn't be surveying. Many attendees went out other ways. At that Norfolk scope, there are many doors that can be opened. But I have surveyed what has come in, and I found a grand mix of old guns, old military firearms, used shotguns, single barrel, pump, lever, all manner of firearms. And most of them, again, are not attractive to the garden variety criminal. But I don't recall ever checking 100 guns in.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Senator,
so you would probably agree that the vast majority of guns sold in these unlicensed or unrecord check transactions are old guns?
They're old guns, but again, those guns that are coming in the door get traded with dealers. Something different goes out in that guy's possession. A few are sold one-to-one on the floor or back out in the parking lot. But let me say something about parking lot while I got that on my mind. Scope has a multi-deck parking facility enclosed, underground, and it serves several purposes. It would cost me more than I make on a show to police that. We also use several parking lots within about a 9-block area that encircles that facility. We can't police that either.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Senator Dean.
do you have to lease those facilities? Do you have to lease the parking lots?
No, we lease the show floor and an office space, and that's it. The parking deck is free open to the public. Our customers and our vendors who use it have to pay for the privilege of parking there to the city of Norfolk. It's a practical impossibility in every show that I know of. And C&E, my client, has a multitude of them in 5 or 6 different states. Several in Virginia. In Richmond, they have the raceway and the show place under different names, but they have shows largely every month, or a little more often sometimes in Richmond. It's the same in all the major cities.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any other speakers in opposition to Senate Bill 109? All right, now we have 5 minutes for rebuttal. Identify yourself, please.
My name is Josh Horowitz. I'm a board member of the Virginia Center for Public Safety, and I also work for the Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence. There's been a lot about today about this 1% figure, about the Bureau of Justice Statistics. That's, and we've also heard, and I put in some of your packets, we have this in front of you, that the ATF says gun shows are the second leading source of crime guns. Both government surveys, how do we square those things? The Bureau of Justice Statistics wasn't trying to do an analysis of where guns came from. They were trying to do an analysis of where guns end up. The fact that a felon says he didn't buy a gun at the gun show, didn't buy a gun from an unlicensed seller, doesn't mean it didn't leave the gun show that way. A trafficker could have bought it. Someone who knew they wanted to sell it down the road could have bought it that way. When ATF went back and actually investigated and they traced the gun back, that's the second leading source of crime gun statistics. Now, one tells you where the gun started. The BJS study, the Justice with the 1%, says it where it ended up. Mr. Van Cleef said most criminals actually steal their guns. That same study shows that 2.2% got their guns by stealing them. Okay, that's not most. Most are from a friend or a family member. Most are from the guy on the corner. The question we're asking is, where did the guy on the corner get the gun? That's what you're trying to answer today. And the guy in the corner could have easily got it from a gun show. And we're not at that. BJS study is not asking that question. They're asking where the gun ended up, not where it started. And that's what the ATF study is trying to show. Number 2, in testimony before Congress, ATF, Secretary Deputy Bouchard, they've been looking at Virginia gun shows in 2004 and 2005. I've included this in your packet. They found that 400 guns from gun shows in Richmond ended up in crime. 300 of those guns were found in the city of Richmond from gun shows. Those guns, because I can't tell you the mix of those guns, I can't tell you which ones came from unlicensed or licensed sellers, but we do know that guns from gun shows end up in crime in large numbers. And the question is, if you're someone who wants to be involved in nefarious activity, why not go to the unlicensed seller, the unlicensed vendor, whatever we want to call? Why do we want to open a big window next to the one that says background check here, no background check there? But there's also a difference. We heard from the state police they like to horse trade. Horse trades between people who know each other. These are commercial sales with people who don't know each other. I heard one of the delegates after the vote yesterday on Friday say, you know, some of these vendors only sell 2 or 3 guns. It's not how many you sell, it's who's buying them, and do you know who's buying them? And if we don't know that, it's a commercial transaction, there should be a background check. I think Mr. Bob Ricker wants to talk about engaging the business. Yeah, why don't you come up and talk about that?
Identify yourself, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Bob Ricker. I'm Executive Director of the American Hunters and Shooters Association, a new gun rights organization, the fastest growing in the country. And I'm also a consultant to Mr. Horowitz's Virginia Center for Public Safety. And I think Senator Deeds asked some very good questions earlier about who can sell guns and where they can be sold legally and who can't. And if you're engaged in the business, and engaged in the business is a very amorphous definition, it's really left up to you to decide whether or not you're going to be engaged in the business to get a federal firearms license. If you get a federal firearms license, you have to have a place of business. ATF will come out and make an inspection, and your license only allows you to sell guns at that place of business. So if I'm a federal firearms licensee, I cannot sell a gun from my inventory at my home. The only other place a federal licensee can sell a firearm is at a gun show, and that's through regulations that were enacted after the bill was passed in 1986. Because prior to 1986, gun dealers could not sell at gun shows. Gun shows had been in existence and were in existence for a long time, but it was only collectors and other people who were interested in firearms that could attend gun shows and sell guns at gun shows. So if you're a licensed dealer, it's a relatively new phenomenon for you to sell at gun shows. Now what's happened is there's been almost a complete flip. You go to a gun show and most of the sellers are licensed dealers, but there are, as we heard from law enforcement, and a figure also out of ATF, an ATF study that was done during the Clinton administration, determined that somewhere between 24 and 42% of sellers at gun shows who were actually selling guns were unlicensed. So that point. The other question, which I think Senator Deeds asked, which is very important, is why don't we have any numbers? Why don't we have any figures? And Senator Stolley and I have talked about this in the past. It's because they're unregulated sales. There's no way for a gun trace to be completed that would show that an unregulated sale took place. So that's really what we're talking about here today, is that if you enact this provision, you are going to get a picture then of what happens and what kind of guns are sold by private sellers at gun shows. The states that have enacted this, the 15 or so states that have enacted this law, do have some of that data. And one of those states is Colorado, which enacted this after Columbine. And we do know that 2 of the guns used in the Columbine massacre were bought from unlicensed sellers at gun shows in Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Hold on, with Senator Stolley wants to ask you a question.
I had one question for you. I know this is an extremely important issue, and one of the things, this ATF 400 firearms sold at Richmond area gun shows, more than 300 guns were recovered in Richmond metropolitan area. Do you have a breakdown of what those crimes that they were used in? I saw something that showed the vast majority of those were actually stolen, that they were stolen, and that's why they were reported in criminal activity.
I'm not sure, but we could get that because ATF has that data, and I know it was included in the congressional testimony.
If you could get that before we vote on this Wednesday, that would be very helpful.
Okay, I will do that for you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a few statements as a patron of the bill. I think there's certain facts that have not been controverted, and that is that under Virginia law, federal firearm licensees are required to perform criminal background checks on individuals purchasing firearms. This law does not apply to individuals who occasionally make gun sales as a hobby. These private sellers can sell a firearm to anyone at a gun show, no questions asked. Between 22 and 35% of the firearm sellers at Virginia gun shows do not possess a firearms license and are not required to perform background checks on purchases. We all know that background checks work. Background checks by licensed dealers prevented 2,668 illegal gun transactions in Virginia in 1 year alone, 2005. The Virginia Tech Review Panel has recommended that we close the gun show loophole. And this is interesting. In the age of widespread technology, it shouldn't be too difficult for anyone, including a private seller, to contact the Virginia Firearms Transaction Program for a background check. It usually takes only a few minutes. Now, gun shows are the leading source of crime guns recovered in firearm trafficking investigations nationwide. The second leading is behind only corrupt federally licensed dealers. These are facts that have not been controverted, and we certainly thank all of you who provide information to us today we will vote on this matter on Wednesday. And since some of the persons here are interested in the legislation affecting the mentally ill, the mentally ill bills, 47 of them so far, will be heard at a joint public hearing on Wednesday at 7 p.m. in House Room D. And all of the public hearings on all the bills will be heard at that time at 7 o'clock. They'll be heard before a special subcommittee consisting of members of both the Health and Education Committee and the Courts Committee. And so if you have interest in those bills, come to that public hearing and we will hear you fully. That will be the only public hearing on any of those bills, so I want to make sure we all know that now. But at 2 o'clock, we will take action on the gun show loophole bill. And at 7 o'clock, we will have a public hearing on the mental health bills. Now, although there are 47 bills, a lot of them are duplicates, and we're going to separate them into categories.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Sassman.
Just one other comment. I'll get the numbers before Wednesday, but I had them over the summer. I don't know what I did with them, but we got about 320 million people in America, in the U.S. And I think there's like 225 million in Western Europe. In the United States, I didn't look for the numbers for last year, but 2 years ago, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me there was like 27,000 gun deaths in this country, close to that. Is that approximately that? In all of Europe, with almost 2/3 of our population, there was like 300 or 400. Now something is terribly out of kilter when you have numbers like that, and sooner or later, we're going to need to find a solution for this, or the people, the elected officials are, the people are going to find it for us. And, you know, y'all need to understand you got 26,000 people a year dying, 22 to 26,000, something is terribly wrong. And, I mean, we're not going to solve it all here today, but sooner or later, like I said, if we don't solve, the elected officials don't solve it, the voters are going to solve it for us.
I want to thank everyone for being on here today and for coming down and giving us information. We appreciate the law enforcement community for coming down, and also the representatives of D and Tech. All of us understand what you went through a little bit, and we're going to do what we can to try to make sure it never happens again. The committee will rise.